Next presenter, Dr. Unalom Janlumanikun from the School of Communication Arts, Thai, Thammathirat Open University. Her topic today is a multiple method of post-globalization, lived experience and negotiation, a case study of Eastern Thailand. And she also talked about globalization, but from different point of view from her research work in the eastern part of Thailand. Please join me in welcome Dr. Unalom.
Thank you very much, Ajahn Sithithep. Sawadee good afternoon, everyone. So I'm a little bit nervous, and it's a little bit too big room, right? Because it's the room one, and if you can come closer, it's gonna be better, or we can get cozy atmosphere and warmer. Should I speak in English or Thai or in English, right? Okay. Or both, two languages. Okay. Yes, my topic is a multi-method approach, globalization, lived experience, and negotiating, which is a case study that I did research in Eastern Thailand. First of all, I would like to tell one point that all the names of the villagers and village name, I have to give you the assumed name, not real name, because of the conflict in the village, and because of there are several power groups which are ready to fight with other groups and use violence, so it's gonna be like to protect them. The main aim of today's presentation, so I'm going to use the strategy of Ajahn Craig yesterday to give you some keywords, because the paper that I give for this conference is very rich data, but today I don't think we have enough time to tell you everything, so just give you some keywords of this presentation. And I try to investigate the ideas, experiences, and practices that underpin patterns of resistance or accommodating to globalization in the community of Eastern Thailand. So I'm going to focus on experiences, lived experience, ideas, and practices in the village. This is my main aim today. And the outline of my presentation, it includes first of all, I give you the fieldwork site background in the Eastern Thailand. And the second one, I'm going to talk about the multi-method approach, which include a questionnaire survey, ethnographic methods, and focus groups. And the last one is going to be findings, which I divide up to be 3 analyses. So for the first one, I don't think I'm going to focus today because it's very complicated, and I think today I want to focus on the second 3.2, negotiating in individual practices, how they negotiate with globalization by individual practices. And the last one, I'm going to talk about power relations in the village, how power relations are related to this practice. So let's start with the fieldwork site background. The assumed name, whatever you pronounce, Ban Tong, Ban Tong, Ban Tong, whatever, because it's assumed name that you can say, is located in Eastern Thailand. And it was an agricultural community with rich natural resources. In the past, it was surrounded by mangrove forest, community forest, see paddy fields and fruit farms, which was very famous. Have you ever tried putsa? Yeah, putsa is the Thai fruit, which was very famous in this area. But after 1981, what happened? A massive petrochemical factory was constructed in the village. Also, the acceleration of urbanization and the arrival of supermarkets, malls, and consumer culture in 1990s. All this accelerated the village into the globalization, into the modernity. So what actually happened to the village after 1981, especially 1990s? Of course, in positive way, they have more income, very high income from when they went to the factory and they worked there, and also have newcomers came to the village and have more business in the community. But also, they had negative consequences as well. As you can see from the slide, I think it's the same story as other part of Thailand when they faced the industrialization in their community. They got lots of natural resources because this community, they used to have like fruit farm, they grew rice. But after 1981, they all lost. And also environmental degradation. They couldn't use the underground water anymore. They got air pollution from the factory. And also social problems. For example, the peasant people who grew putsa, they had to sell lands to the factory, so they lost lands. And also the social problems in terms of when the globalization came to the community, they got problems like the female teenagers got pregnant when they are very young, 13, 14 years old. And also cultural dislocation. For example, they lost their collective spaces to do the activities like Songkran festival. So when they lost space, they lost culture as well. So this has happened to the village. And then what I try to do is I try to pay attention to the ways, the grounded experiences, and how the villager respond to all these changes. This is the way, this method that I try to use with the research. It includes both quantitative and qualitative approaches. So I started with a questionnaire survey, and then participant observation, in-depth interviews, the collection of personal documents and photographs, and finally, I just focus groups. So now, let's have a look at the first method. The questionnaire survey, why I use this? When I went to the village, I start with the questionnaire survey. I use this method to, like a tool, to make friends with the villagers as well. But the objectives of the research, there are three objectives. The first one is to map villagers' consumption of mainstream and activist media, which I'm not going to talk today. What I'm going to talk today is to explore differences in attitudes towards globalization and traditional ways of life. among indigenous residents and newcomers. This is what I want to focus today. And the last objective of questionnaire survey is to collect accounts of the perceived history of the village and problem it faced. So this is the objectives, and then how did I sampling the population? So if you see these 6 groups, this is a sample that I selected from population 4,600. So how did I sampling these 6 groups? At first, I set 2 variables, which is I think it was very important at that time. It was age and length of residence. What does it mean, length of residence? I divide up to be people who are indigenous and people who are newcomers. Indigenous mean people who lived in the village before 1981. It means that they lived there before the factory constructed. And the newcomers, it means people who lived after 1981, who just migrate to the village after the factory was constructed. And then I use another variable, the age. So I divide up to be 3 categories. So it's younger age, another one is working age, and another one is older groups. So I divide up to be 6 groups, 50 people each groups. And then the method that I use is purposive quota sampling. So we're gonna got 6 groups combined between age and length of residence. And then what I did in participant observation is, so I stayed there for about 8 or 9 months. So I stayed with them. So I went to the meeting and also participate in all festivals, in the worship, like on เจ้าพ่อ in เทศมหาชาติ in Songkran festival, in funerals, in wedding receptions. So whatever that they have in the village, so I try to participate. This is participant observation. And then in-depth interviews of the key informants, for example, fishermen, peasants, executive of the factory, the state officer or the state officials, monk, former leaders, house estate owner, activist media producers as well. And then when I did the in-depth interviews and when I got data, I tried to analyze to be 3 categories. So as you can see on the findings, that it includes the domination of capitalist modernity, which I'm not going to talk today. What I'm going to talk today is about individual practices that they try to negotiate the local impacts of globalization and also the power relations. So I'm going to skip this one, analysis 1, to analysis 2. What I try to show today is about Buddhism or Buddhist practice. I'm not sure I can say Buddhist principles or not, but it's quite related to the power of superstition. And also, if we have time, I'm going to talk a little bit about